I've talked before and said that the Clippers can definitely use a big man that needs to be a part of their rotation, needs to be a part of their roster going forward, using an extra added big man, I should say. And now, of course, a lot of people out there are looking at the Rudy Gobert situation. It's looking like it's a possibility, but a very slim possibility, but it's looking like a possibility at the least. And if I had to grade it, I would say maybe a 10-20% chance out of 100 that they might be able to possibly pull off a trade like that if Utah is willing to jump off his train and let Rudy Gobert go. And the Clippers have been one of the teams of the interest that, have shown across the sites here lately. But I will say this. The Clippers are also in position to make some small moves that can make a big difference, for their team as well. And sometimes when you make small moves, a lot of people can't see it right away, but in the future or long run, it can make a big difference in the long run. You see what I'm saying? So when you look at it from that standpoint, the Clippers have to make educated moves here. They can't try to go after the biggest moves out there possible and lose too much depth of what they have in regards to, the players and the core players they have, because a lot of the trades and a lot of offseason moves they can make, is going to have to be trades. They don't have like any assets in regards to any picks or any things like that, because they traded all those away and they got rid of all those to basically, get with the Kawhi and PG thing, to get those players on the team. They basically trade away a lot of their assets just to have those two players and gambling on their NBA lives to win a championship and hoping that the process works out. So with that being said, more than likely they're going to have to either make trades or get somebody who is very, very on a very minimal contract where they really don't have to give up much to really gather him or get him or acquire him on the team. So, the reports out there in regards to like a small pickup that can, that the Clippers can cherish over time, I would say, is one name that I thought that I had to think through about it, because it's like, thinking about this player, I didn't really, see him in regards to somebody who could fit with the Clippers at first. But I guess the more I thought about it, I mean, him being an extra added piece on the roster couldn't hurt the Clippers. And it's an older player in Thaddeus Young. And Thaddeus Young, to me, not only he's a power forward / center, but he is a big man who can, get some good offensive rebounds, do the dirty work, kind of like an Isaiah Hardenstein to a degree, but except a little bit or a lot more seasoned. Of course, he's been in the league about 13 years. And at one point in his career, I thought he was a pretty decent, solid power forward, big man, good role player who can help a team, not maybe help them win, but could be a part of a winning culture. And I think he still has some of those qualities. He's not really a high octane guy. I mean, he only averages like this past year, 6.4 points, per game with about, maybe 4 or 5 rebounds per game. He's not a high octane guy, but at this point, you got to look at it like this. What he could be to the Clippers could exactly be what Andre Iguodala is to the Warriors, even though he's never been as good as a player as Andre Iguodala, I would say. But I mean, at one point in time, whether you believe it or not, him and Andre Iguodala averaged about the same points in for a couple of seasons. Andre Iguodala at one point in time averaged about 14, 15 points a season, somewhere in there. And so did Thaddeus Young. So, I mean, really, not comparing the two, because I would definitely take Iguodala over Thaddeus Young. But Thaddeus Young is a very, very underrated, solid big man, or he was at one point, and he definitely can bring some wisdom to the team. And when you look at the Warriors right now, the way they got blown out by the Memphis Grizzlies and all that, if they had Andre Iguodala on the floor with some of his good, decent defensive skills, he's not a good defensive like he used to be, but some of his defensive skills and his wisdom on the court and his, savviness, they would be a better team, because they can actually rotate more on defense and actually have a little bit more defense on the court to stop some of the offense that, or some of the penetration that the Memphis Grizzlies get going to the basket and finding wide open shots. Because when you have high IQ players like that, they just seem to always have an effect on the game no matter what. It's just when they're on the court, they always seem to find a way to make things happen, even though they're not as effective as they used to be. And what I'm saying about Thaddeus Young, he can kind of sort of be that to the Clippers, because not only he would be a good locker room guy, he would definitely fit right in. He's not coming in to score because that's not what he does. And he's basically a guy who would do the dirty work for them, almost like I said, like Isaiah Hartenstein. And plus, he would be an extra body they would have just in case Hartenstein or Zubac go down if they don't decide to, trade Zubac or anything like that. He would be an extra body that they would have, on the roster just in case one of those guys go down. And on top of that, he's got a lot of experience and wisdom, so he knows how to play the game. He's good at getting offensive rebounds at times. He's good at being crafty. And like I said, he understands his position and he never steps out of character. And those are the type of players you want on your roster, who can fill your roster that you really don't have to give up much for. And let's be honest here, the Clippers, I don't really foresee a situation out there too much for a big man that they're not going to have to give up some assets for. I mean, it's just the way it is. If they go after Rudy Gobert, hypothetically, you know how much they might have to give up to get Rudy Gobert? Way more than they need to, because the one thing that makes the Clippers a unique team is their depth. And the fact that they got depth all the way down to the last man on the roster, all the way up to the first man on the roster. Their depth is very wide range. And if they take any of this depth away, they're going to lessen their chances of winning a championship. So if they can add pieces or veterans to the team who know how to play basketball, who can, help train, players like Isaiah Hartenstein, maybe not train them, but, kind of ingratiate some of his wisdom in a player like Zubac, who needs more wisdom and guidance in regards to his game so he could take his game to another level. And, have the extra bodies on there just in case, because the Clippers have been hit by injuries so much, having somebody like Thaddeus Young on there to kind of fill in just in case somebody goes down. At least you got somebody on there with some wisdom, who's been in the league a while, who knows the game. And like I said, his IQ has never been that bad. His IQ has always been decent. He's just always really been on sorry teams. That's the only problem with Thaddeus Young. He's never really been on a good team. I think he was on the Spurs at one time, but I think that was right before they got maybe Kawhi Leonard or something like that, and they was playing good at that time. But I mean, I don't remember them winning a championship with him on there. Maybe they did. Maybe he was just on the roster. I didn't know at that time. But I mean, he's been on the Toronto Raptors. He's been on the Philadelphia 76ers. They weren't good then. You know what I'm saying? I think he's been on the Pacers. They've never been a championship team. He's always been on a team where he never had a chance to really, utilize his skills and things like that. And now that he's kind of like older and things like that, of course he's not going to have time to do all those things, but he can go on a team and implement what he knows and go out there and hustle. He's one of those he's one of those dirty hustle type players. He hustles for rebounds, dive for loose balls, at times he can cause turnovers, and like I said, he knows how to set picks and the little things, the intangibles, take charges, things like that, game changing plays that can actually alter a game. Because sometimes when you look at games, a lot of times, whether a player flops or not, sometime when the momentum is swaying for the other team and the opposing team gets a charge and the referee calls offensive foul, it changes the momentum of a game a lot of times. And you see it all the time, basketball games. It's just the way it is. Big calls, from referees can dictate the outcome of games. And Thaddeus Young has always been one of those type players, very savvy, knows how to draw fouls, can cause turnovers. He's very solid on defense. He's not the best defender, but he's very solid. And like I said, he's been around for 13 years, so he knows the game. He knows, how to play his position really well when he's put into that position to play. So this is why I said getting little pieces like that can actually help you win a championship, even though a lot of people might not be able to see it. They might not know it, but every team that you've ever seen win a championship has had those type players like Thaddeus Young, who goes out and dive for loose balls, do the dirty work, get tip-ins, putbacks, get a few offensive rebounds, cause deflections when playing defense, staying in front of a guy, being a little physical with them. Those are those intangible players that always make up championship teams. I mean, you can go to every championship team you ever think of and you'll definitely find, one of those guys. So it's like, I feel like if the Clippers can add to their depth and not take away from it by not spending much money or trading away any of their assets like that, that's going to make them even better team than what they are, because it's what I'm saying. They have all the pieces to win a championship. And like I said before, if they just get an extra big man just to fill the roster to have, just in case Zubac goes down, where they can rotate out sometime and throw him in there and throw a different look at somebody, if somebody gets in foul trouble or something like that during the game, and have a guy who can go in there with wisdom and know how to play the game, it's going to make you a lot better team. That's just the way it is. And then on top of that, and like I said before, if they just added a backup point guard, it doesn't even really have to necessarily be a starting point guard. They just added a good, solid backup point guard to Reggie Jackson to take pressure off of him at times, where the backup point guard can come in and play the point guard role while Reggie Jackson switches over to the 2 position, which is the shooting guard. That would take a lot more pressure off Reggie of trying to make plays and make shots, because that's not what Reggie does. Reggie is really a shooting guard. He's not a point guard. So it's like even a backup point guard, the little things like that will help the Clippers out so much in regards to filling out their roster and filling out their depth. And those are the things that make their team actually complete, by having those intangible type players. They don't need big name players. They got Kawhi and PG. They don't need no more big name players. I mean, if they happen to get one, that's great. Like if they were able to acquire like a Damian Lillard or somebody like that, well, of course that would be great if they're able to do that. But that's highly unlikely unless something really drastic happens in Portland, where things go awry and they have the opportunity to get somebody like that. So you can't look at that, because that's more like far-fetched. That's not more like reality. And reality is they only need a couple of pieces. They don't need to be starters. They don't need to be high-end players. The Clippers got what they need to win a championship. Their main thing is just being healthy enough to do it. I mean, think about it. Like I said, this past year before last, when Kawhi got hurt in the playoffs, everybody was saying the Clippers would have made the finals if Kawhi didn't get hurt, if he didn't go down. They made it all the way to the conference finals without him. So it's like, when you think about that, they don't really need much. They don't need all these big names and all these people like that. They just need some good backup, support on their roster. And like Ty Lue said, running back basically with the same team. Now, if they want to trade Marcus Morris because they're dissatisfied with his services, I wouldn't be too offended by that, because I've been dissatisfied with his services too, because I feel like giving him $65 million, he definitely should be a little bit more adequate offensively in regards to his consistency. I just believe that myself. You could believe differently, and I respect your opinion, as I always do, but I also respect my opinion too, because I just believe that paying somebody that type money and they're being that inconsistent is a bad thing, when you have a guy on the bench in Luke Kennard who has the same type of contract, which they gave him a $65 million contract, and he's more consistent than the starter in Marcus Morris, who starts every game, rather than Luke Kennard basically coming off the bench. You see what I'm saying? It just doesn't make sense. Now, of course, Luke Kennard started some games, of course, because, due to injury and all that stuff. But Luke Kennard was basically the guy that was supposed to come off the bench and supply them with 3-point specialist offense and come out there and do his thing. And he's more consistent than Marcus Morris, and he plays less minutes, since he's been on the Clippers, since he's been signed to the Clippers, So it's like, to me, when you look at that in its totality, Marcus Morris has to be more consistent, and he has to do more. He has to shoulder a little bit more responsibility, and he hasn't. And this is the type of thing I'm talking about. When you have players like that there that's not doing their job to their capability, it's okay to trade players like that away if you choose to. Now, I'm not saying they're going to, because I feel like they might actually bring everybody back. I feel like they will, or they're definitely trying to bring everybody back. Not saying or guaranteeing they will. We have to see what the offseason brings, but at the same time, it wouldn't surprise me if they did keep Marcus Morris. It wouldn't surprise me if they didn't. Only thing I say is just be more consistent, and that's pretty much all that is for in regards to him. But like I said, bringing on a player like Thaddeus Young, you're not getting much. You're not getting much superstardom, because he's not that. You're not getting much of a player in that regards, but you are getting wisdom. You are getting some basketball IQ, and you're getting a guy that doesn't mind doing the dirty work. You're getting a guy that doesn't mind going out there and doing whatever's asked of him and fill a position and teach some of the younger guys, which is Zubac and, Hartenstein, how to be a professional and be the player they need to be in situational basketball. Because he's been around 13 years. He's been around several teams, on several teams. He's kind of been a journeyman, but I feel like he could find a home with the Clippers because there again, Ty Lue can get the best out of anybody. He's just that good of a coach. So, with that being said, having somebody like him extra on the roster, he can, neutralize he can, fill in the other two big men on the roster, some of the wisdom that he knows that can actually help elevate their game a little bit more. So, when you look at it from that standpoint, that's a good thing. Because like I said, Thaddeus Young at one point was averaging close to 15 points a game a couple seasons, back then in his younger days, I would say in his heyday, if you want to call it. So, think about it. If Zubac was averaging 15, 16 points a game, the Clippers would be a whole different team. The Clippers would be unbeatable if he was averaging 16 points a game with like 10 rebounds, something that Thaddeus Young has averaged about 7-8 years ago in his prime. You see what I'm saying? So it's like bringing somebody on like that definitely gives you, more depth, but also gives you a good locker room guy, and also gives you somebody who's not going to come in there and disrupt anything in regards to what they already built as a culture. And like I said, you don't have to give anything up for him. It's just basically, almost sort of like a pickup off the street, because I'm not even sure if Toronto was going to keep him. I think Toronto is thinking about letting him go. And if they do, trade him, you're not going to lose anything in a trade. You might trade somebody on the bench, Xavier Moon or whoever, somebody like that, where you're not really losing much to get him. And I don't think that's going to happen, because like I said, I think he's going to be a free agent. Or I think, at some point he's just going to, I don't think the Toronto Raptors are going to keep him ultimately. So, I think he would be a very, very underrated small pickup, but I definitely think he'll, help the Clippers in the long run in regards to depth and the little things that he can bring to the team. And hopefully maybe they add a backup point guard at bare minimum to give them a well-rounded offense. And then on top of that, then they have the team they have going into next season, and you got to hope that they stay healthy, because if they do, I definitely believe a lot of teams in the NBA are going to regret playing them, especially when it comes to the playoffs, because I think they could beat every team in the NBA 6 games or less if they're healthy. I just don't see no team taking them to 7 games next year in the playoffs if they're healthy, because they're just that talented. They got that much depth. And when Kawhi Leonard's on the floor, you always got a chance to win a championship, no matter who's on the roster. So, with all these pieces and toys that they have on the Clippers, Kawhi has a lot to play with, and he has a lot to be excited about if he comes, when he comes back this year. Hopefully he comes back 100% healthy, ready to do his thing, ready to go, and ready to, push it to the limit and get this team over the hump and finally break that curse and win a championship. But hey, that's my take on everything. Leave any comments in the comment section. Check out my other videos as always. And hey, Khaliis out.